go In the Huddle on the Woodward Radio Network. In the Huddle is driven by Mills Fleet Farm. From Tanner Sports Grill in Kimberly, here is Justin Hall and Packers defensive back Devon House.
And good evening and welcome to Tanner Sports Grill in Kimberly. We are in the huddle once again on the Woodward Radio Network. I am Justin Hull. No Devon House tonight. No David Bakhtiari as well. The players had a bye, late practice. So we welcome in, though, a familiar face to In the Huddle, where for the next hour we'll be conversating, maybe sharing a few laughs, a couple of good debates as well, as it always is, with Bill Scott from the Wisconsin Radio Network, WHBY and WSCO.
Thanks.
Longtime host of the show.
Yeah, long
well.
time. Way too long.
Well, good to have you in, Bill, and talk some green and gold for the next hour. Bye week yesterday, so we sat home and watched other games on the TV, and kind of a weird time when the schedule came out to have a bye in week 4, but kind of as it turned out, maybe a blessing in disguise considering the handful of hamstring injuries and a couple of concussions that the Packers are dealing with.
Yeah, and then the Packers will have some opportunity. Like the Thanksgiving week, they'll be able to get away for, they'll play that game on Thursday, and then McCarthy will give them Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe even Monday or half of Monday off. So, there will be times where he'll be able to ease up on the schedule a little bit to make sure that, he keeps their legs fresh and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is weird, because they haven't been early. 1999, I think, is the last time they've been anywhere close to that early.
And that was, week 5 or week 6?
Yeah,
in there. We'll talk more about the injuries coming up in the next segment, our Compass Land Consultants injury report. But let's go back to the beginning of the season. Packers sitting at 1-2 right now, and I know it's something that we talked about a couple of times where it maybe surprised Packer Nation that the Packers are 1-2, but considering the teams they played, considering how the schedule worked out, 1-2 was a realistic chance for the Packers to be at that point right here.
Yeah, and it's just how they got there is the weird thing. I mean, you look at, they lose to the Bengals, and then the Bengals go lose to Cleveland. Now, maybe Cleveland's a little better, but I think the Packers have just done a poor job of doing some of the things from an execution standpoint to be able to win more than they lose. For the first 2 weeks, they only had 1 takeaway, and then they get 4 last week and still lose the football game because they gave 4 away themselves. So they're just not, putting the right combinations together to win. And now they're a bad luck injury team. And this hamstring thing, they don't want to talk about it at 1265 Lombardi because they'll probably be being ridiculed and criticized for the way their training staff and how they're doing things. You go around the league, there's not hamstrings like there are in Green Bay. I mean, this is a problem that comes up year after year, and for whatever reason, it's happening more to Green Bay.
Yeah, 5 right now on the injury report in total, and just one of the guys back at practice today. But again, more on that coming up. And you brought up the Cincinnati losing to Cleveland, and we'll get more into this later on. But it's kind of the way the NFL has gone. San Francisco looked great against Green Bay. They come back and they get blown out by Seattle, roughed up by Indianapolis, then all of a sudden they're back to where they were against St. Louis. It almost feels like that's going to be the story of this year, and Green Bay could fall right into that mix when you go ahead and look forward at the schedule, with the NFC North appearing to be a little bit better than people anticipated, and some other interesting games along the way.
I don't know that I'm ready to say the NFC North is better than I or anybody else anticipated because they've only played 4 games. I'm a firm. The Bears always start fast out of the gates, and then they come crumbling back down to earth. We don't know what the Lions are going to do. The Lions were playing the Bears yesterday, so that's maybe how they got. I mean, Cutler, he does this every year. They get out to a good record. They start out strong, and then all of a sudden he starts throwing interceptions and turning the ball over. I mean, he had 4 of them yesterday, and even Stafford didn't play great football yesterday. But they had Reggie Bush on their side, so that was good for Detroit. I just think it's too early to sit there and worry about or start thinking about trends as to who's starting off hot. What did we think was going to happen in the beginning of the season, and why? And should we be surprised right now? It's way too early to be surprised, because I could say I'm surprised that there's 2 3-1 teams that aren't the Packers at the top of the division, and 4 weeks from now it could be totally flip-flop.
And flipping that around too with the Giants and Pittsburgh, 2 0-4 teams that, let's be honest, when Green Bay sees them, you have to think that they're going to figure it out because they are the Giants and the Steelers. So that one kind of goes both ways on that. We'll get more on this.
The only legitimate team that is out there that's 4-0, and I don't want to call Seattle illegitimate, but the one team that really is setting the world on fire is Denver.
Yep.
Seattle should have lost yesterday.
They should have lost to Carolina week 1, too.
There you go. So they're 4-0, but they're kind of a paper champion 4-0 right now.
We'll get more into the NFC in some of those 4-0 teams, the 0-4 teams a little bit later on. Back to the Packers, Bill. Most positive thing that you take from the first 3 weeks of the season, maybe a position, maybe a player, maybe something the Packers are doing a little better.
Well, I think it's probably the development of their running game. That's something that they wanted to do during the offseason. They went out and drafted 2 running backs, and now they appear to be committing themselves to the run, even though they've got some injuries in that area. But they've been able to give the running backs the ball, and I think the offensive line is slowly getting better in that area, so that would be probably one of my more pleasant surprises.
I would answer that, but that's what I wrote down, offensive line run blocking.
Yeah.
I thought as a whole, as a run blocking unit, the line has been better. Not necessarily on the pass protection side of things. Aaron Rodgers sacked 51 times last year, 10 times in 3 games. If you spread that out 16 games, that's 53 sacks. So they're on pace to get Aaron Rodgers knocked down or sacked more times than last year, which isn't a good thing.
Yeah, and hopefully that will improve, as they move along here and play a little bit more. They are awfully young. Bakhtiari on the left side and Barclay on the right side. There's a lot of youth there, and they're going to make some mistakes. But I've done shows with offensive linemen. They love to run block because it's an aggressive mode. The defense has to stop you instead of you stopping them. In a pass block situation, it's totally opposite. You're on the defensive. They're coming at you, and you've got to stop them from getting your quarterback. It's a lot harder to do. So if you can keep them guessing a little bit more, keep them off balance by running the ball more, I would think that those sack numbers as the season goes on maybe would go down a little bit.
Positive-wise, we got about 30 seconds. Most positive thing. Or actually, I'm sorry, that's what we said. Negative. The biggest negative. We can maybe dive into it a little bit more after the break. I'll leave you mine, and then we'll get to yours coming up here after the break. I wrote the pass rush, and in particular Nick Perry, because I remember
I remember you saying Nick Perry was the key to the season for the defense for the Packers, so that would be my negative, would be Nick Perry, because he just hasn't done anything.
Yeah, he really hasn't. It's been a rough go at it, and like you said, I thought he was the key to the defense, to the pass rush. He hasn't done too much, and we haven't seen too much of it. But Bill Scott with us here tonight as we are in the huddle. It's our bye-week show, and we'll have more coming up from Tanner Sports Grill in Kimberly here on the Woodward Radio Network. And we are back here at Tanner Sports Grill in Kimberly in the huddle on the Woodward Radio Network, brought to you by Mills Fleet Farm. Devon House will be back next week. David Bakhtiari and a couple. Bill Scott sitting in with us tonight here from Tanner's. And Bill, kind of back to what we were talking about at the end of the last segment with the pass rush and Nick Perry and Mike Neal. An interesting move at the beginning of the season, moving him off the defensive line to a linebacker spot. And, there's a lot of mixed reviews, I guess, on that decision. But when you look at outside of Clay Matthews, he's been the most effective pass rusher the Packers have.
Well, he's been more effective in the role that he's playing now than he was as a defensive end up to this point. So good for him. It's giving them a little bit more than what they would have gotten. I'll say this, though, when Clay Matthews went out in the second half last week, they had nothing in terms of any kind of a pass rush. So they still haven't found that person on the other side. Whether Perry turns in to be that guy or Neal or somebody that's on the roster, I don't know. It's pretty early in the game, so we'll see if somebody develops. But they were hoping Perry would be that guy, and so far he hasn't been that guy.
Well, you mentioned the rookies as well as we kind of take a look at the rookie class here, and it's kind of hit on their performance so far. Like you said, it's really early. There's a lot of season to be left. We might see him, but first-round pick Dayton Jones, he's been battling the ankle and hasn't played too many snaps. I think the Packers would have liked to get more production from him, but we really haven't seen too much at all.
They basically played him in obvious third down pass rush situations, and there's not as many of those. There's maybe 15, 16 of those type snaps in a game, and that's about what he's getting. So it's quite frankly been a little disappointing. The injury early on, and I'm not sure if he's 100% now. He's got to be getting close, especially coming out of this bye week, but I'd like to see him throw him out there a little bit more. I know this, in the early downs, though, Pickett's playing pretty well, and Raji's playing pretty well, and obviously Jolly's playing pretty well. So, they kind of have their three, and it looks more to me like Dayton Jones is not, on early downs, is not able to crack that group. Like, he's just not good enough at this stage of the game to take that playing time in a run-down situations to take that playing time away from those three.
Maybe going back to the positives, too, he could have thrown Johnny Jolly into there, too, because he's playing, and he's playing consistently for a guy that was a borderline making this roster this year.
I think you're one of your co-hosts. Devon House has had a really
he has too.
I mean, he was in the doghouse during preseason and struggled a little bit, and then he finished strong at the very end, and he's continually gotten more opportunities every week. Special teams, he's been outstanding, but even in defense, he's getting more and more opportunities. And I guess if we're going to, there's one more out there, and I think, to me, that this is maybe one of the more obvious ones defensively, and I can't believe I forgot, but I think Sam Shields has been phenomenal. They said that they were going to have Tremont Williams stay on his side, and Shields would stay on his side, and that's the way they're going to play it. But obviously, they changed their mind, and they've decided to put Shields on the best wide receiver if there is a standout, and there has been on a couple of occasions, and Shields has done a great job just shutting that guy down.
Yeah, he might draw Calvin Johnson next week, a job that Tremont has had over the last few years. Continuing with the rookies, Eddie Lacy and Jonathan Franklin, I'll throw them in the same boat because I think we saw flashes. I think we've seen a little bit about what the Packers want to get from them, and I think moving forward, with their upside, I think it might be a nice 1-2 punch that they have there at running back.
Eddie Lacy is a little incomplete at this point in time because he's just, quite frankly, been hurt most of the time, hasn't been able to stay healthy, but you can see a few times where he really flashed some brilliance there. And, out of Franklin all of a sudden comes out of nowhere. I mean, he hadn't done anything. Now, I'll say this, and I agree with Tom Clements, the offensive coordinator. They throw these guys out there with the third string in the preseason and training camp. And then you ask them to go into a game, and there's the second and there's the third string offensive line blocking for them. And you wonder why they can't get anything. These guys are not going to be on a football team, these third string offensive linemen, when the final roster, so you're asking guys that are going to be unemployed in a couple of weeks to pave the way for you. And it's understandable why it's not happening. And then everybody wants to say, well, Franklin stinks, and he hasn't done this right, and he hasn't lived up to his fourth-round draft pick capabilities and all that kind of stuff. And I just hate, I hate to see, the same thing goes with a quarterback. How's that third quarterback ever supposed to get a real shot when he's playing with third-string offensive linemen? But that's the way it is. But all I'm saying is that we shouldn't be too quick to cast judgment on guys like Franklin, because when he did get to run behind a first-string offensive line, the guy came through last week.
You bring up the quarterbacks, look at Matt Flynn. I mean, it was a perfect example where a guy that in the preseason, I don't think anybody saw what he did against New England and Detroit, but you put him out there with a number one offense, a really good offense, and the guy put up some numbers.
Yeah.
He's not doing so well in Oakland, but Oakland isn't Green Bay either. J.C. Treader, we'll probably find out more about him next year. A first or a fourth-round pick had the leg injury. He's been out. And one of our co-hosts here, David Bakhtiari, and I'm probably a little biased when I say this, co-hosting the show with him. But
no.
you look at where he is as a 21-year-old, and I think today is actually his 22nd birthday. And you look at what he's done in that short period of time. I mean, there's a guy, when you look at that learning curve and where he can go, I think he has an opportunity to be a staple on that line for years.
Well, it's that remains to be seen, but
yep.
He's off to a good start. He certainly was cast into a situation where he's been asked to play and play a huge role. I mean, we're not talking right side. We're talking about the quarterback's blind side, so he's being thrown right into it. And in some areas he's done quite well. In some areas he struggled. I thought he had his worst game against the Bengals. He struggled against Cincinnati, but he also made some good plays too. And but when you get thrown in there and you're the guy and they're not looking on the waiver wire to try and replace you, that's a good thing.
Sam Barrington, Nate Palmer, a couple of guys that made the roster. We've seen some special teams impact with Barrington specifically. Charles Johnson, on the practice squad, a wide receiver remains to be seen there. Kevin Dorsey's on the IR. And then, of course, Micah Hyde, the cornerback, who has pretty much gotten minutes from day number one. He was with us last week, and remember him saying that he felt like he played every snap of preseason. He was out there with the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s. But I think it's paid off, and he's looking like a real good pick for a fifth-rounder.
Micah Hyde is a guy that there's one of those in every training camp that plays all the time and does well. And then you get him in the regular season, and he kind of falls back a little bit because he's playing against the starters. And he's found the sledding to be a little bit more difficult with the regular season playing in real games with the ones. But he hasn't done poorly either. I mean, I think he's held his own. But he really did have a really nice preseason.
All right, let's get to our Compass Land Consultants injury report. Compass Land Consultants, a full-service real estate consulting business specializing in the sale of vacant land, including hunting property and timber investments. Just like the Green Bay Packers need an entire team of great players to be successful, you need a team of experts working for you when buying that perfect property. Compass Land Consultants, they have a team of experts ranging from real estate brokers to appraisers to professional foresters, all with the knowledge you need when searching for that perfect piece of land. Let them put their team to work for you. Give them a call, 800-548-6933, or check them out online at clclands.com. And Bill, we're talking about the hamstrings, and Coach McCarthy didn't say a whole lot today, if anything, outside of wait till Wednesday.
He never does.
which I guess
I don't know why they ask him. I mean, they keep asking, and he just never says anything.
We do know Eddie Lacy was back out in full pads, which means he's cleared and ready to go, and barring some huge setback or practice injury, will be out there on Sunday.
Well, he was cleared to practice. I don't know I don't think we know if he's cleared to play at this point because of the concussion, but it's a good sign that he's back out there. And they did sign Mike Hill from the practice squad to fill that vacancy that Jeremy Ross had created when they released him. So it looks like the fact that they did that means that James Starks probably, and who did not practice today, probably is a no-go for Sunday against the Lions.
Yeah, and I want to get to that move, too, in the next segment because it's interesting. 4 active wide receivers.
I keep messing up your show,
we can talk,
don't I?
But that's I probably did the same thing to you the last few years when I'd help you out on the bye week. Morgan Burnett was back, the safety, and then a slew of players still out. Casey Hayward, Jarrett Bush, John Kuhn, and Clay Matthews all with the hamstring injury. Jermichael Finley didn't practice today. Concussion, or he's been battling that toe injury the last few weeks. And then James Stark still out with the knee, but you're right, Mike Hill, that signing off the practice squad might indicate his status moving forward. Bill Scott with us here tonight. It's our bye week show, back with more from Tanner's here in Kimberly. It's In the Huddle, brought to you by Mills Fleet Farm on the Woodward Radio Network. And we are back here at Tanner's Sports Grill in Kimberly. In the Huddle, returning on the Woodward Radio Network. In the Huddle, brought to you by Mills Fleet Farm with Bill Scott tonight. I am Justin Hull as we continue on here talking some green and gold. Transportation for our guests provided by L&S Classic Limousine. Lenny and Sue, the best in the business, taking tonight off with the players having the night off as well with the bye. But we look forward to
disappointed. Lenny could have given me a ride.
I was actually going to call him and see if he wanted to do that. He called me about 3 times yesterday to make sure, do you need me? Do you need me? Do you need me? That's the kind of prompt person
Lenny's good.
that Lenny is. But we'll get to the NFC North here in a moment. But a couple other Packer things, Bill, I want to get to. Maybe some of the big headlines here throughout the season. We'll start with the return game because Jeremy Ross let go the day after the Cincinnati game. And we got one fan of that move in the house. And the Packers sat on it for a week. And today we found out that they brought Mike Hill from the practice squad, a running back that was with San Diego in the preseason. He's been on the practice squad. And then brought in a kick returner, wide receiver, Reggie Dunn, who was with the Steelers in the preseason. He goes on to the practice squad. So Hill becomes the 4th running back, down to 4 wide receivers. And you mentioned it before. I think this kind of shows the fear with James Starks and maybe his knee injury.
It's looking like Starks won't be available. I mean, he didn't practice today, and it's looking like he won't be available for a while. So, I'm sure that this is classic Packers. They did the same thing with DeJuan Harris. This guy was a guy that hadn't had much of an opportunity at all, and then spend some time in their practice squad. And if they like you on their practice squad, if you stay there for a little while and you learn the system, they will promote from within because they believe that guy that knows the system and has been working in the system for several weeks is just as good or maybe a better fit than somebody that comes off the street.
And they did try out some people last time. B.J. Hill from the Green Bay Blizzard. He was one of the options. I know around here people saw him as the Blizzard, as a workout. But, I mean, teams will do that. We knew about the Vince Young workout, but then you go back with workout Seneca Wallace.
Hill was more from a return standpoint, though, whereas Mike Hill from the practice squad is going to be more as a running back. It's looking like a certain bet that at least on punts you're going to see Randall Cobb returning punts for the Packers probably a decent percentage of the time. There might be times where they'll throw Micah Hyde out there from a security standpoint. You're not looking, but when they need something, whether it's just securing a ball in the fourth quarter, an important punt return, or maybe you really need a big return, I bet my bottom dollar that Cobb's going to be out there.
Which to me is, that's why I bring up the 4 wide receivers, because the injury concern when it comes to Randall Cobb heading into the season and why they had to find somebody. And now you keep Cobb in that role. And let's look at it like this. Aaron Rodgers has 4 targets now that he trusts. I mean, Jermichael Finley, Randall Cobb, James Jones, and Jordy Nelson. A couple of years ago, about 7 or 8 guys that he could throw the football to, and they had the stocked wide receivers and probably pre-Corliss knee injury. The knee injury has really changed him. So now you put Cobb into that return game, and the risk is even riskier now than it might have been when you had 5 wide receivers or 6 wide receivers if we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and what you have to do is, and what they're doing is they're weighing the risk of a potential injury to Cobb to somebody that you have another Jeremy Ross out there that can't handle a kickoff or a punt return. They fumble it, and it costs you a football game. So I think they're thinking that the risk with Cobb is much more worth taking than the other way around.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we'll see Hyde back there a little bit, and Jonathan Franklin probably on kickoffs.
Right.
He did some of that in the preseason. He might get the call there.
And kickoffs, really, I mean, how many times does a kick returner return a kick? The way they've got the ball moved up 5 yards. Yeah. I mean, they're kicking the ball 8, 9 yards deep in the end zone almost every time. You maybe return 1 or 2 kicks a game.
You just need a guy to, A, catch the football, and B, know when to take a knee or when to come out. That's probably the biggest thing right now after how the Ross tenure ended. The other thing, and it's come up the last couple of weeks or since the Cincinnati game specifically, and that's the Aaron Rodgers in the fourth quarter close game situation. There's so many different stats out there people have put together, whether it's above 500 teams, 4 points or less, 7 points or less, whatever. What do you think of that conversation when you hear the pundits, the talkers talking about Aaron Rodgers in the fourth quarter in close games?
Well, first of all, Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, so I think a little of this is blown up to more than what it really should be. That being said, there's obviously a number out there where they're within a certain stretch in close games, and I know there are different people that are also responsible for them not coming back. Maybe they had a lead and somebody lost it, or maybe somebody missed a field goal, or there's so many variables that are involved here. But the bottom line is he's still your quarterback, and you're still losing games by 7 points or less. So, that number's just not real good, regardless of whose fault it is. And I'll always say this, and I'm not sure Rodgers is out there thumping his chest when things go well, but the quarterbacks get way too much credit and take way too much blame, And so if Rodgers is going to be the guy that gets all the headlines and gets all the credit every time they do something well, then it's got to be a little bit on his shoulders when they don't come back and win a football game too.
Yeah, you point at those situations. I
mean, he's the guy that makes $20 million. $22 million. I mean, he should take a little heat for not bringing teams back in the fourth quarter and stand up and take a little of the blame for it.
Do you think that comes out because the guy before him was the man at the comeback?
I'm sure that's got a little bit to do with it, sure.
Which I find interesting, and I'll throw out a number, and I looked back, and I was pretty surprised by this, but from 1994 to 1998, probably the prime of Favre and the teams, that he was with, very similar to Rodgers since 2008. He's played on some great teams. From 1994 to 1998, Favre had 3 fourth-quarter comebacks in 5 years. And he had 7 his first 2 years, which kind of put him on the map, and I think that's where it is. But it shows you when you play for a great team, as Aaron Rodgers has, sometimes all those opportunities don't come up where you are in those situations. Now, there has been opportunities where he hasn't come up.
Maybe Favre did a better job of getting the lead and keeping it then.
Which Rodgers has done as well.
You know.
I mean, when you look at 6 losses by more than 7 points, that's in Aaron Rodgers' starting career in 5 years.
You know, I mean, I told you this. I hate this topic. I hate the topic. I mean, it's just it doesn't mean anything because when push comes to shove, it's how many times you get me in the playoffs, how many times you win me a Super Bowl. You know, so far
Rodgers has 1.
Yeah,
more than a lot of quarterbacks on that list ahead of him. So, one last thing here, and it's a fan question, obviously, because the fans are the ones that get a little ruffled up when things aren't going well.
A little?
A little? Okay. A lot ruffled up. How long does the Super Bowl honeymoon period last for Mike McCarthy and Ted Thompson?
I don't know. It's going to last a while. As long as Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback and they keep winning North Division titles and keep going to the playoffs, I think it's going to last a while. I think there's only a few hardcore people like yourself that have higher expectations.
You're throwing me in that category.
No, I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you. I think it's going to last a while. I mean, if he were to be first round exit a couple of years in a row, maybe that would be a different story. But I don't know that anybody is beating the drum for Mike McCarthy's job right now.
I want to bring this up too because I think it's league-wise. Everyone's talking about Tom Coughlin right now in New York. Remember that the Giants didn't make the playoffs last year, so this is the second straight year something has happened. And besides their Super Bowl year, I think that's the only time they've made the playoffs in the last 4 years. The 2 times they've made the playoffs since 2007, well, 3 times. 2 times they won the Super Bowl, 1 time was an early exit. So they're a team that's actually gone through the ups and the downs. They haven't had the consistency that the Packers have. I mean, only Baltimore, 5 straight trips to the playoffs is more than McCarthy and Thompson. So yeah. I'm with you on that. I think these guys have a long time for those haters that are out there that want to see somebody different in there is in there. I think both these guys have a good shot of leaving on their own terms.
Sometimes, though, you need sometimes you need to be booted out the door. And this isn't, this isn't your – I'm going to take longer than this music bed here to make this point, so we have to talk about it when we come back. I'll let you go to break.
All right, our Brew Pub Pizza Twitter and Facebook questions coming up as we return here with Bill Scott, and we'll hear what he has to say about this whole thing, too. I can't wait. I want
Tom Coughlin.
Coming up next year. In the Huddle returns here on the Woodward Radio Network. And we are back here at Tanner's Sports Grill in Kimberly. In the Huddle returns on the Woodward Radio Network. We're brought to you each and every week by Mills Fleet Farm. David Bakhtiari and Devon House, our Packer hosts this year. They have the week off with the bye week. Devon will be back next week. Bill Scott, longtime host of this show and longtime voice of everything when it comes to the Green Bay Packers, sitting in today. And we had the break, and everyone's been sitting on the edge of the chair waiting to hear Bill's thoughts on the Tom Coughlin situation.
Well, my thought on some of these older great coaches, and I think Coughlin's a great coach. I mean, the guy's won a couple of Super Bowls, but it's sometimes you don't make the playoffs last year. You lose your first 4 games this year, and you look bad doing it. It's not like they're even in these games. There's 2 things going on here. Either one, which I believe to be true, is that the Giants are an old football team. Their defensive line used to be one of the great pass rushing units in all of pro football. They are not anymore. They are old and slow, and they're not getting to the quarterback anymore. They have no running backs anymore. I mean, they had to go out and pick up the guy that they used to have.
Brandon Jacobs.
And he's pretty much washed up. So that's what they're dealing with, and no wonder why they can't win football games. But you got 2 options. You can either clean house and start to rid yourself of those old players. Now you're not going to do it right now, but next year you need to get rid of a lot of these guys and go young and clean house and change the whole thing up. Or you need to, sometimes the coach needs that mouthpiece needs to change because you need a different player to remotivate the players. I'm not sure this group of Giants players is going to be substantially better with a different coach, but sometimes that's what you got to do. If they hit a standstill, big old bump in the road, sometimes you got to change that one guy because it's easier to change that guy.
And we were talking about this in the break, Bill, is the way that most NFL teams go in that situation is the easy move, and that's get rid of the one guy, which is the coach, right. Which Cincinnati, I think that might be the only team that I can think of that, Marvin Lewis looked like he was on his way out, and what did they do? They completely changed the team and kept Marvin Lewis there, and it's actually worked out. But most teams go the route of the coach.
Right. Now, the Packers are a little bit different because they have a tendency to keep all of their draft picks each and every year. So there is always a decent changeover with their roster every single year. In fact, I think they were the 6th youngest team in football this year.
6th or 7th.
That's the oldest they've been in a long time. They're usually like the 1st or 2nd youngest team in pro football, but they changed a lot of their players. And you know what? If Ryan Pickett ever stopped playing, they'd be the youngest team again because he's ancient.
We have our social media questions coming in. That's brought to you by Brew Pub. Lots of Matzo Pizza, the new Brew Pub Pizza, which, by the way, I picked up this weekend at the grocery store. I saw it in the freezer. Outstanding. Lots of matzah, lots of cheese. It's the way that I like to go. It is specifically designed with the hungry person in mind. It's bold. It's outrageously delicious. A half pound of Wisconsin mozzarella cheese, premium meats, veggies, and again, Wisconsin mozzarella cheese. Got to add that twice, Bill. When you crave a really serious pizza that brings that great brew pub experience, this is the one. Pick it up today at your favorite local grocer. Brew Pub, lots of matzo pizza. Experience a truly great pizza. I did, and I'm recommending it for everyone. Let's get to some of our questions here, Bill. First, we'll start with a question coming from Bob in Marshfield. This one came on the Facebook page today. Thought it was an interesting one. After Aaron Rodgers and Clay Matthews, who is the player the Packers can at least afford to go down? I'll start. I would have said it was Brian Bulaka heading into the season, and he actually went down but it's worked out for them.
I would say it's one of the wide receivers, either Jordy Nelson or Randall Cobb. I think those would be the ones that you could least afford to lose at this point.
I'll throw Jermichael in there because I think when they lost him too, you saw Rodgers' rhythm against Cincinnati was as bad as we've seen it. His quarterback rating showed that. I think he still is the most valuable receiver that Aaron Rodgers has, is keeping him healthy. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get a contract extension.
I think Jordy Nelson tops my list, but that's. But
I'll take either of them.
But you're right. But the tight end is a great pick because it's probably almost equal.
Mark and Fond du Lac chiming in on Twitter wants to know, what does Dom Capers need to do to save his job?
Well, that's a good question. I think the Packers just got to win. They got to advance further than what they did a year ago. If they got into the NFC Championship game, the numbers have to be a little bit better. I thought they made progress last year, but still, when push came to shove, when they got into the big game against the top 1 or 2 teams, his defense didn't hold up very well. So, a little injury luck would certainly help him. Clay Matthews, you keep that guy in the field instead of having these hamstring issues all the time, because that does not help the defensive coordinator's job status when Clay Matthews can't play. But they can't continue to play poorly in big games at the end in the playoffs and bow out semi-early, because if they do that again, he might be out of a job.
You can't exit by 17, 22, whatever.
Yeah.
The numbers have been the last couple of years. We'll get to one more here from our questions this week. This one's from Eric and Kimberly. Who do you guys think have the best shots of dethroning the current best teams in their conferences, Denver in the AFC and Seattle in the NFC?
I don't think anybody has a chance to dethrone Denver unless they have major injuries.
It's almost like a one game in the cold, kind of like last year where, Peyton Manning threw the interception and cost the team the game.
And I still think that San Francisco still holds the best option in the NFC going head-to-head of beating Seattle at this point.
I'm going to differ with you on that one, Bill. I'm going to go with New Orleans.
Okay.
I think offensively they're better than Seattle, and defensively they've played really good this year. Very underrated. Rob Ryan has come in and installed his 3-4 defense there. I think New Orleans right now might be the best team in the NFC, while everybody's pointing to Seattle.
Well, see tonight, Play Miami tonight.
That should be a good one, 3-0 versus 3-0. We'll dive into some of those unbeaten teams, get your thoughts on if they're for real or not, a little bit more on the division, and wrap things up when we return. It's Bill Scott with us tonight. I am Justin O. In the Huddle from Tanner Sports Grill in Kimberly here on the Woodward Radio Network. And back at Tanner's in Kimberly in the Huddle here, one final segment on the Woodward Radio Network tonight. Bill Scott sitting in with us, former host of this show. Hear him everywhere, here locally, WHBY, WSCO Radio, also on a lot of our stations here on the Woodward Radio Network with the Wisconsin Radio Network. And thanks to everybody chiming in with our Brewpub Pizza social media questions. As always, at In the Huddle Show, that's the Twitter handle. Give us a follow. You can type in your questions there each and every week for our guests and our player. And then, of course, go to inthehuddleshow.com. And it'll direct you to our Facebook page with a lot of our information there. Well, let's get to a little bit more on the NFC North, Bill. And Detroit 3-1, Chicago 3-1, but we kind of got a sneak peek earlier that you want more of the season to go before you're ready to say that they're legit.
I mean, every year that's the same thing. I mean, the Lions haven't necessarily started out as well all the time, but the Bears have a tendency to do this every year, and then our good buddy Jay Cutler does the same thing every year, and he has to change his bed in the morning because that's what he does.
It's you look at both of those teams weapon-wise, and I think offensively they're up there with Green Bay, and I think it's the first time we can say that in a while. I look at Calvin Johnson, Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush has been phenomenal in Detroit. Burleson was having a pretty good year. They're hoping Broyles can get on. Obviously, Burleson there. And then, of course, with Chicago, with Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, and Matt Forte, I think they have weapons, but it comes down to, as he's saying, the quarterbacks.
Comes down to the quarterback. I mean, I watched I was watching a decent portion of the Bears-Lions game yesterday, and I just think Cutler forces the ball to two guys and forces it mainly to one guy. I mean, he goes to Marshall a lot, and he goes to him in double coverage and triple coverage and just throws the ball up for grabs sometimes, thinking that, well, if he doesn't get it, he'll knock it away, and it doesn't always work that way. That's where the turnover's coming up. He does not, and the thing of it is he's a smart guy. I mean, he's one of the smartest guys out there, and yet
doesn't look the
part,
like
and he doesn't play the part when he plays for the Bears. So I just, and this isn't. I mean, not that I care about the Bears, but it's not a rip on the Bears thing. It's just it is what it is. They do this every single year. Defensively, they lost Henry Melton for the season to an injury. I think they've got a great takeaway turnover type defense, but I don't know that they're a defense that strikes the fear of God in the end in terms of trying to stop you either. So, in the Lions, I think it's just too early to tell. They've got a little bit. Reggie Bush was a huge pickup. And if Reggie Bush stays healthy, he could be a difference maker for him.
He could be, a lot like Darren Sproles was for New Orleans.
In fact, if he stays healthy, he will be a difference maker for him.
And then Packer fans will maybe unfortunately see him coming up this Sunday. Matt Castle gets the start for Minnesota. They win yesterday. Greg Jennings, a couple of touchdown catches.
Matt Castle's an upgrade. I'm still not sold on Matt Castle either, but he's better. Playing Matt Castle, and they finally did it. I mean, they should have done it a week earlier.
Because Ponder was hurt, too, so they had an excuse to do it.
Right. I think when it boils down to it, playing him for the rest of the season might get them into a wild card situation if everything goes well.
We talked about New Orleans, Seattle, Denver before. The other unbeaten teams, New England, Kansas City, and Miami. I mean, those last two, wow. I don't think anybody thought they would be there. I look at Kansas City, and they might be the ones loving Denver's success the most because they're quietly sitting there under the radar. Andy Reid has done a heck of a job.
He has, but Kansas City hasn't played anybody yet. I mean, their schedule's been...
Outside of Denver, who is anybody in the NFL
I know.
right now?
But I'm telling you, it's easy pick. You can sit there and take a look at their 4-0 record and be totally impressed with it, but who, they just haven't beaten anybody yet. But it's better than being 2-2 or 1-3 too.
AFC, 13 of 16 teams are 500 or above. That's interesting. NFC, 7 teams are 500 or above. Only 4 teams in the NFC are over 500 right now.
Yeah.
Kind of going into that parity thing. And, Atlanta's 1-3. Washington's 1-3, and St. Louis. You and I both like St. Louis heading into the season. They've really struggled so far.
I think the Sam Bradford experiment has to be over with. They need to find a different answer in St. Louis because he's not the guy anymore.
Peyton Manning, 16 touchdowns, no interceptions, 1,470 yards, 138 quarterback rating.
And it's like taking candy from a baby. The guy makes it look so easy. It's unbelievable.
So you're going to predict that he's on pace to hit his 64 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 5,700.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, there's a situation too where, you know, as good as they are, and we talk about the records of teams, the teams that they're going to play twice. You know, they're going to play Oakland twice. They're going to play San Diego twice.
Kansas City twice.
Yeah.
That'll help the record.
And I'm not
get
sold
up a
on Kansas
bit,
City being as good as their record. So,
which kind of leads to the last question.
It's kind of like the Packers in the NFC North for all these years. You know, you could count on 6-0 for Green Bay every year.
10-6 win the division.
10-6 in this division.
10-6 in the NFC North this year.
I think it'll be close to that. Yeah.
I think that's going to be the number.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be 10-6.
You might have to win a tiebreaker at 10-6. 11-5 would probably be the shoe-in for you, but it's going to be around that number.
Which makes this Detroit game coming up on Sunday must win, whatever, however you want to say it. But home game in the division against a team that's out to a 3-1 record.
Then you just got to beat them at their place.
Yeah. If you lose to them. Bill never takes the bait.
There is plenty of time for the Packers to catch the Lions and the Bears. That will not be an issue for the Packers, in my opinion. I could be totally wrong. The Lions could shock me, and maybe with Reggie Bush they will, but I think there's plenty of time.
Bill, it's always fun. I didn't get a chance to say this last year, and I only got 10 minutes to do this. Bill's been like my mentor in this radio business. So anytime I get an opportunity to work with, you're the one to blame. But, Bill, I thank you for everything you've done.
You bet.
Appreciate you sitting in today, and I know we'll talk to you again. All right?
My pleasure.
All right, he's Bill Scott, Justin Hull with us in the Huddle here on the Woodward Radio Network.